The honourable member for Simcoe North.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise here, as it always is in this chamber, to talk to my colleagues, and we'll be talking about the budget today. I think it's helpful to first ask the question and set where we are, and then ask, does the budget meet the expectations that Canadians had? Gas prices have almost never been higher. Our food prices are going up and up and up. Retail prices are continuing to increase. Construction materials and housing prices are going up, and that includes rent. So both home ownership and rental accommodations are becoming incredibly more difficult and unattainable for Canadians. So, on the day after the budget, Canadians woke up. There was no immediate relief, no tax holidays, no tax rebates. And in fact, on April 1st, this government increased the carbon tax, which we know causes inflation. The Bank of Canada has been so kind to tell us that it has provided at least 0.5 of a percentage point to the inflationary measure that StatsCan puts out every year. The real question is, why is the government not doing everything in its power to reduce inflation? Now, I'll give it to the government that all of the inflationary pressures are not domestic. We've got supply chain issues. We now have a war in Ukraine. However, they have an easy lever to pull with respect to inflationary pressures that it creates. It's its spending and carbon tax. And let's talk about spending. Let's go through a few numbers of facts that are irrefutable. These are from the government's own documents. In 2015, the government spent about $300 billion that year. In 2019, the government spent $426 billion. And in 2022, that's this year, it's projected to spend about $452 billion. Madam Speaker, that's 25% annual growth rate from this year compared to 2019. It's 53% growth in annual spending from 2015 to today. All the economists have been telling this government to take its foot off of the pedal of spending because it is increasing inflationary pressure. So any assertion that this budget is prudent is comical. Further, we're led to believe that from 2015 to today, this government, while it has been increasing spending by 7 to 8% every year since 2015, that now, all of a sudden, from this year going forward, it will hold the rate of spending growth to 2 to 3%. The only problem is nobody believes the government. Absolutely no one thinks that this is possible for this government to hold spending growth to 2 to 3%. In fact, in this budget, we don't even have projections for spending on the promise on pharmacare. We don't have projections for the spending on new health care transfers. I mean, we're just coming out of a pandemic, and this government is saying it's not going to increase health care transfers. But we have a fiscal anchor, we're told. The debt to GDP ratio is going to continue going down. The only reason the debt to GDP ratio is going to go down is because of inflation. The entire government's fiscal plan, the entire government's fiscal plan is based on inflation. It's the only way it's going to work. In fact, just in 1 year, from last year to this year, this government's now projecting $170 billion in new revenue that it didn't project last year. That's money that's coming from Canadians in the form of higher prices. That's money that people are having to pay. Their dollar's not going far enough. It's a silent tax, Madam Speaker, and it hurts the most vulnerable in our society. In fact, in the tightest labor market in a generation, this government has spent money and hiring 10,000 civil servants a year, every year since 2015. And what do we have? In the tightest labor market, the government still wants to spend money and still wants to hire new civil servants. But where are these people going to come from? All of our small businesses across the country are crying for more people. So the government's decision is, oh, well, we're going to hire some more people. Well, those are individuals that now can't work in the private sector. that can't help a business grow, that can't help a business get back on its feet. They pay taxes and salaries. That's going to lead to private sector growth. But let's talk about some specific measures. I'm a balanced person. There's some good things in the budget, no doubt. Employee trusts, that we're going to set up an opportunity for individuals to pass their business on to employees, I think is a welcome measure. What this government has proposed to do with Ready, Willing, and Able, by the way, which policy was started under Finance Minister Jim Flaherty, giving that organization some additional funds to encourage those with intellectual disabilities to enter the workforce, should be applauded. The Great Lakes fishery investments are well needed, and there was some money for freshwater cleanup, but at least on the freshwater cleanup, it was nice to see Lake Simcoe referenced. However, it is a much smaller number than what had been previously promised. So let's talk about some of the things, everyone talks about, well, conservatives, they just like to talk about all the spending and not about what they're going to cut. Well, here we go. Here's some ideas for the government to consider. The Infrastructure Investment Bank, instead of, breaking up is really hard to do, it seems like. Instead of walking away from something that's not working very well, this government expands the mandate and gives it more money. Not only that, it takes the same failed model and says, well, we're going to create a new $15 billion innovation fund. Again, superclusters are reintroduced with some expanded money. Would be unparliamentary to think of to say the word that I'm thinking of right now, Madam Speaker. This government is planning on spending money on a buyback program for guns instead of taking that money and putting it into reducing crime. We need to do much more of a spending review, a comprehensive spending review. It's nice to see that there was one mention, but it's not nearly going to be enough. And let's talk about young people for a minute. The new, shiny, tax-free home savings account sounds amazing, except when you find out it's going to take 1 full year before it can come into effect, and then it's going to take another 5 years for an individual to max out on the contributions. And also, you cannot use this tax-free savings account, the home tax-free savings account, with the home buyer's plan. So you have a choice, it's one or the other. So really, you're going to gut one program and replace it with another for a shiny new object, mostly a marketing ploy if you ask me, because instead what the government could have done was said to individuals who use the home buyer's plan, you know what, you don't have to pay that $35,000 back. That would have been a far more effective way to accomplish what it's trying to accomplish and have immediate effect. For young people, we asked young people to stay at home for 2 years. We asked this of all Canadians, but young people in particular put their lives on pause for 2 years for a virus that represented very little risk to them. And yes, Canada had a very low death rate, and I think that is a positive outcome of the pandemic and some of the responses. But young people have now come forward and they're re-emerging back in the economy. And what do they find? The thank you that they found was they now have a national debt that's doubled, that they're now responsible for, and a housing market that's completely unattainable. Bank of Montreal released a report and singled out Orillia, which is in my riding, for having a 300% increase in house prices in 6 years. It is incredible to think how young people are looking at this housing market and believing it's attainable. Madam Speaker, I've talked about the bank tax before in this chamber, and if the government thinks that there's excess profits in that industry, we should really be revamping competition law. What is going to happen, I can tell you right now, Madam Speaker, my prediction is we will see an increasing number of bank branch closures across this country, in particular in rural Canada. It is no surprise that in just last week after the budget, banks made closure announcements in small communities across this country, including one in Brechin, which is in my riding, others in Pefferlock, Hannington, and Stayner. Madam Speaker, I'll close on another matter that is very close to my riding, the boat tax. There are 25 marinas and 15 boat dealers in my region. And this government thinks that if you can afford a boat that it deserves to be taxed. Well, with the price of cottages and housing, these individuals are looking for other options for recreation, and boating is one of them. But this tax is only going to push jobs, investment elsewhere. These individuals are going to buy their boats south of the border and bring them up. And Madam Speaker, that is going to hurt the people of my community, and that is going to bring in far less revenue than this government believes. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Comments.